Okay. Anyway, I think that's enough time, inshallah. So we'll get started. I'll take a look at the quiz. If there are any questions, I have our beloved brother, Muhammad Ola, keeping track of them. So if anybody has any questions online, inshallah, we can take care of them. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and get started. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So last time we had spent discussing on the things that actually break your wudu. This time, inshallah, we're going to talk about the wudu itself. So Ibn Qudama, he actually starts off this chapter talking about and describing the wudu. And he says that this is the description of the prophetic wudu, of the wudu of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he mentions 9 things here. Saying that it is not at this point, later on, he actually breaks this down and he'll actually talk about how these categorize and which one of these are arkan, which one of these are the conditions to the wudu, which of these are wajib, which of these are an obligation, and which of these are actually sunnah. So this is just a general description, which I'm sure most, if not all of you, are aware of. Making the intention, again, right now we're not going to talk about whether these are conditional or whether they're obligations or whether they're sunnah. We're just going to talk about, in general, the description of the wudu of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who a number of companions narrated to us. So making the intention, first and foremost, saying Bismillah, washing your hands, including the wrist. So when we talk about the hands, this is the hands, right? This includes the hands, rinsing the mouth and the nostrils, right? Actually putting water into them, and this is done 3 times. And while there is a description on how to deal with both of them, it's very important to understand that the sunnah is to do them together, right? So you actually take water, put a little in your mouth, and take the rest, and you inhale it and you sniff it into your nose. Separating it is permissible. There's nothing wrong with that. Washing the face and wiping through the beard. So the face is going to be this space here. So I've actually lost my hair, but if you had hair, it would be where the hairline starts and up to the jawline. So all of this includes the face. Now, if you have a beard and it covers your face, it's okay. It's enough for the water to reach it. Now, underneath here, right, the water isn't going to penetrate the entirety of the beard, and it is not an obligation to actually wash it. So what you do is something called takhleel, and it's running your fingers through your beard. Like we said, the face is the hairline to the chin. Light beards. So if you have a light beard, right, if you have a thinner beard, then the entirety of it needs to be washed. And how do you define what a light beard is? A light beard is when you can actually see the skin underneath. I'm sorry? So if you can see the skin underneath, right, or the hair is extremely close. I mean, some people, I understand, they have very thick, even if their beards are lighter, they're very thick. But in general, if you can see the hair underneath, I mean, you can see the skin underneath, then that is considered a light beard. Wiping the hands through the elbows. Now, again, you can see that I have bolded hands, right? And this is something I want you guys to pay attention to. When we talk about the hands, we are talking about, so at this point, it is not enough for you to wash from here to here, right? It's not enough for that. You actually have to wash your hands again, because like when you get into later and when we discuss it, we'll talk about that this is the actual obligation, right? This is where the obligation falls versus the first time where you wash your hands. Wiping the head, including the ears, forward and back. Again, this is the sunnah that we were talking about. He will differentiate these later, meaning you go back and then come back again, right? And then you wipe with the thumb and then bring your fingers into your ears. Again, these are all descriptions of the wudu of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right, the right foot and then the left. Washing the right foot, and the foot entails everything up to the calf, the ankle. So the ankle needs to be included in that. And the ankle, meaning from the top of the ankle down, all of that needs to be washed. And then wiping between the toes. Even some narrations mention the Prophet used his small finger to wipe between his toes. And he looks to the sky and then he states his shahada. Again, these are all general descriptions. Some of them are actually based on, most of it is based on authentic hadith. And then you have certain sections of it, like here in section 9, which is actually based on a weak hadith. But we'll talk more about this in the night time. So breakdown, how do we actually categorize the different parts of the wudu? And this is something that is very fundamental, something that is extremely important. Prerequisites. Now, these are things that an individual must have in order for his wudu to be considered correct. And this applies not just here, but it applies. Some of these apply to different situations as well, but this is specifically to the wudu. The first of them is Islam, that the person must be Muslim. The second, he has to have reached the age of discretion, right? So this is what we call rushd. He needs to have finished wiping. I forgot what that. I think I put something in here that I wasn't supposed to. I'll have to go back and review that one, what it is that I intended. Removed any barriers from the places of wudu. The water needs to be halal, meaning that in the Hanbali madhab, now this is something that is, I believe it's the Hanbali madhab, and there's one other madhab, I don't recall, but they actually require the use of halal water. If you use stolen water, for example, then your wudu will not be sound within the madhab. And finally, intention. Intention is a condition for the wudu. If an individual doesn't have intention, then it is not permissible. His wudu is not sound. So these are conditional obligations, meaning that if an individual doesn't do these things, then his wudu is not correct. So we had prerequisites here, and then here there are conditional obligations, meaning that if an individual doesn't have these things, then his wudu is incorrect. So number one is the intention. Now, the intention I mentioned as a prerequisite, and it falls more into a shart, right? It falls into more a conditional part of the wudu. You need to wash all of the limbs at least once. So there are some limbs that you can wash multiple times, but the minimum condition for your wudu to be correct is you have to wipe at least once. If you don't do that area, if you don't wash the area at all, then your wudu is invalid. You have to wipe over the entire head just one time. So in the Hanbali madhab, if I just do this, just one time back, then my wudu is sound, my wudu is correct. In the different madhahib, so the Shafi'is, they say you only have to do part of the head, meaning that it's enough for me just to wipe, a few hairs. The Ahnaf say I have to do at least a third of the head. And this is actually very convenient for many of our sisters. Maintaining order. So the Hanbalis and the Shafi'is say that an individual must maintain the order, meaning that you can't wash your feet before your hands or your hands before your feet, even out of forgetfulness. So even out of, you make a mistake or you forget or you skip one, then you have to start your wudu again. So the Hanafis and the Malikis, they say that it is valid as long as your wudu was maintained, meaning that the previous area is still wet. So it is okay for you to continue, and maintaining the order is not a condition. Continuity. Now, continuity means that I cannot have unnecessarily long breaks between each part of the wudu. I wash my hands, then I wait. Then I rinse my mouth and my nose, and I wait. And the question is now, how long can you wait before each of these sections? How long can you wait before each of these breaks? And the reality is how the scholars have defined it in normal weather, right? This isn't like, like extremely hot or extremely warm weather where, the moment that you finish one, your hands and your feet are already dried. But in normal conditions, as long as the previous area is wet and you maintain that continuity until the end of the wudu, your wudu is valid. And the continuity is from the previous area that was washed, right? So not from the time you wash your hands to the time you wash your feet, but the time you wipe your head to the time you to the time you wash your feet. So that's where continuity applies. These are non-conditional obligations, meaning that if an individual doesn't do these things, he will have sin upon him, but his wudu will still be valid. And again, this is within the madhab. This is with the Hanbali madhab, saying the basmala, saying Bismillah. So if you say Bismillah at any point during the wudu, your wudu is valid. If you say it after it is done, then your wudu would be invalid. It wouldn't apply, it would be incorrect. So the Hanafis, the Malikis, and the Shafi'is, they say it is a sunnah, and some of them, in a minority Hanbali opinion, also says it's a sunnah, but some say that it is a non-conditional obligation, meaning that as if you say it, if you don't say it, then your wudu is going to be invalid. You will have a sin on you, versus the other madhahib, they say that there's no sin on you, it is just a sunnah to do it. And wiping the ears. Wiping the ears, meaning with new water. right? This doesn't mean that you continue wiping, but if you wipe the ears with new water, this is what is preferred in the madhab. And again, this is a sunnah. This is a sunnah. And the ears themselves, if a person does not wipe their ears and they only wipe their head, then for the Hanbalis, the wudu is still valid, but the person will bear sin because in his obligation of wudu, it is not a condition. Do we have any questions?
So the one question is salams.
So.
You're gonna be there for tazkiyah class?
Yes, I will. So the question was on the next class, and I will be there for the next class. Inshallah. So these are all the sunan. Sunan, washing the hands. Now this is the first time, right? So this is the first time when an individual starts the wudu. When you washing your hands, this is considered a sunnah. This is not an obligation. Exaggerating the rinsing of the mouth and the nostrils. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Balighu." He said, yes.
The bismillah is before starting, yes?
It's before starting. This is what is the sunnah. If you do it during the wudu, then your wudu is valid, but you have a sin for not doing it beforehand. And if you do it during. Yeah, if you do it during. And if you don't do it at all, then your wudu is invalid. No, I'm sorry. Your wudu is still valid. Your wudu is still valid. It's a non-conditional.
Oh.
It's non-conditional, meaning that if you do it before, this is what you're supposed to do, and you're rewarded. If you do it during, then your sinful, but it is valid. Yes. So washing the hands. This is sunnah. This is not an obligation. Exaggerating the rinsing of the mouth, meaning that if you do not exaggerate, then your wudu is still valid, right? Your wudu is still valid. Running the fingers through the beards and toes. This is a sunnah. This is not an obligation. Beginning with the right over the left. This is a sunnah. And washing 3 times. You can do it 1, 2, 3 times. Your wudu would still be correct because these are all sunnah. So what is disliked? In the madhab, it is disliked to do more than 3 times, but your wudu would still be valid. So if I repeat these sections or I repeat certain parts of the wudu 4, 5, 6 times, my wudu is still valid, but it is something that is makruh, it is something that is disliked. And israf, excessive use of water. So a good question here, an appropriate question here would be, okay, how do I define excess? What do you think?
How do you define excess?
How do I know I'm using too much water? It's tough, right?
So if you're, or imagine in the context would be if water is just flowing and you're not actually utilizing it. Like so you can make wudu just talking.
Okay.
And the water's pouring out.
Okay. So letting the water run and not using it.
Not using it.
Okay. Okay. So I would say that in general, if within whatever culture you're in, right? It's defined by culture. Right? It's defined by culture. So for example, in the winter, it's the middle of January, I walk into a masjid and I see someone and they're sitting in front of the water looking at it. No, seriously. They're sitting there and they're looking at the water run. Would I normally, in that circumstance, now remember, it's middle of January, in that circumstance, would I say anything to them?
No, because they're probably warming up.
Right, because they're waiting for the water to get warm, right? And it's no, I'm being serious, right? So yeah. This is something that it wouldn't be considered excessive. But it's the middle of the summer, right? It's like July. The guy walks in and you see him just standing there looking at the water.
Counting the blessings.
Right, he's counting the blessings of the drops. Right? he's doing tadabbur. He's pondering over the blessing in the water that he's been given. No, but in that situation, you probably would say something. Be like, okay, please don't waste water. Versus they're two same situations, right? You have someone sitting there just waiting for the water. But in one situation, culturally, because both of these are dictated by the culture. And if someone is making wudu and they're talking to someone, for example, and they'll let the water run a little bit, it probably won't be a big deal in most masajid, in most places. Now, is it better for between the when I change what's the word I'm looking for? When I move to the next step of wudu. And I turn the water off between steps. So like I wash my arm, I wipe it, right? I wash my arm, I turn the water off, and then I wipe, and then I do the same thing again. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And it can be my way of saying that I'm saving water. But during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, how much water did he use to make wudu?
16 ounces.
I'm sorry?
Like a mud.
He used a mud. Now, how much is a mud? This.
Like, yeah.
No, this is a mud.
Water.
So mud is it's a volume, right? Mud is a volume, and this is why it becomes so difficult when we talk about zakat al-fitr. Zakat al-fitr is actually measured in mud, right? It's measured in volume, but they usually tell people in weight. So how that does is they actually did an average of a number of different things that the Prophet gave in zakat al-fitr, and they turned that into a weight, and then they rounded up a little bit too, just to be on the safe side. But it's actually a measure of volume. So siwak is related, right? It's related to the wudu. It's something that we hear about, something that we talk about. What do you guys know about the siwak?
Sunnah.
It's sunnah. What is the sunnah?
That he would do it before salah.
Okay, so he used to do it before salah, right? He used to do it before wudu. He used to use it in these different situations. But is it talking about the arak stick, or is it talking about just cleaning your teeth?
I mean,
Cleaning your teeth. All right. So in most of the madhahib, including the Hanabila, I would agree with you. And they say it actually applies to cleaning teeth, meaning that even using a toothbrush it would be sunnah, right? Why? Because siwak is ala wazn fi'al, right? And that's ism ala. That's actually the name of it's the name of the action. I'm sorry, it's not ism ala, but it's the name of the action itself, right? You're not actually talking about the tool, except the Shafi'is. The Shafi'is, they actually put a special reward associated with arak tree, and Wallahu alam, that seems to be because of the bristles of the arak tree, and that's how they used to clean their teeth, and that's how they used to take care of them, which is why they give it afdaliyah. So the toothbrush is equivalent. You have some of the madahib talk about when to use it and when not to use it. A lot of these are based on weak hadith. When it's disliked to use the siwak, and a lot of it has to do because after the zenith is when the sun is at its highest point, and because of the heat, and Wallahu alam, it would seem like you're getting closer to the time that it's eating, and it could be a fitna for you. And Wallahu alam, it seems like that could be part of the reasoning for it. So the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis, they say that it's disliked after Dhuhr, versus the Hanafis and the Malikis, they say you could use it anytime. There's no actual prescription. There's no limitation. So this brings us to the question of following prophetic customs. What if somebody uses the stick siwak? Is there a problem with that?
No.
Would he get rewarded for the stick, using the stick itself?
Based off intention, yes.
Okay. What is the intention?
The intention is to do what the Prophet did.
Okay.
Well,
Good reading of the slides.
I can read that.
So no, you're right.
But
though.
not like that.
Absolutely. No, so if I'm doing it because I love the Prophet ﷺ and I want to imitate him, right? So what else would fall into this category?
It could theoretically, I guess, you said that the toothbrush also is something that could be used, right? Like, imagine just about any aspect of your life can also fall into that category.
Okay, that's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for examples.
Like dressing nice could be a form.
Okay.
Rather than that.
So dressing nice, that would fall under more like general sunnah, right? Because you want to show the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed on you. I'm okay with that. But I'm talking about specifically following the Prophet ﷺ, and how do I determine in following the Prophet ﷺ whether something is sunnah or whether something is ada or whether something is a custom?
I mean, wouldn't any of the customs that you follow under like a really broad sense of what the word sunnah is, like wouldn't all of that be?
Okay, so everything he did would be a sunnah for us.
Right.
Okay. But how do I break down those sunan to be like a sunan tashri'i sunan that would be in the sharia and a sunnah that would be in ada or custom?
Didn't he say it? Like,
Okay, he would tell us,
Yeah,
right?
he
He would inform us and say, hey, you should do this or you should stay away from that.
like for example, not eating garlic would be something he did. It's a sunnah, but he never prescribed that. for
Something
us.
that he didn't prescribe, right? So you would actually need a prescription to help determine. Are there some things that he prescribed or he didn't do that we would say, no, that's from the customs?
Not eating garlic.
Not normally,
Oh, okay,
not
yeah.
normally, but there are situations like when he was sitting with Khalid and they brought him dhub, right? They brought him the lizard meat,
Yeah, I looked at that.
right? He didn't eat it,
Yeah.
and he said this is not something that we eat.
Hmm.
And then what did Khalid then Khalid, he asked for clarification.
But I like it.
Right. No. So Khalid, he says, is it haram? He said, because he saw the Prophet wasn't taking it, so he asked the Prophet, and he said, is it haram? This situation is kind of funny because some people take it to say, okay, it's sunnah now to eat it because Khalid took it. Because Khalid ate it. So when it comes to customs and it comes to like prescription, yes, these are sunnah. Now, those prescriptions can reach a level where they're obligations or they can reach a level where they are recommended. But you also have customs. Those are things that Prophet maybe he wore, right? The way that he walked. Places where, so even Ibn Umar, after the Prophet died, there was a tree that the Prophet used to ride down the path and he used to duck under it. Even after the tree was removed, Umar had to cut down Ibn Umar. Every time he would pass by that place, he would still duck by that place. So when it comes to the customs of the Prophet ﷺ, is there reward in the actual custom itself? Like if I wear a izar al-nida, right? If I wear like a lower wrapper and an upper wrapper because I want to follow the Prophet ﷺ, is there reward in that clothing in and of itself?
Where can clothing, but wouldn't it be in your action?
Okay. What part of the action?
The imitation.
What part of the imitation?
Right?
Okay. You guys are right. You guys are definitely. I would get rewarded for my love at that point.
Right.
I would get rewarded for my love of the Prophet ﷺ, not rewarded for the action itself, right? For the imitation itself, there's no reward, but there is a reward in loving the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Except the Lahiris, right? So the literalist school, they say no. Like even doing that action, just because the Prophet ﷺ did it, you would get rewarded just for doing that action. It's not too big a deal, but it's just something I wanted to share.
It's not a big deal. It's good to practice with those ideas, with stuff like that don't become too heated.
So wiping.
No, I feel like that's important because, like, for example, like I'm from Philly.
Yeah.
Everybody wears the izar like over jeans.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just out of like
because the Prophet did it, right? Or the Prophet he never left his house with his head uncovered, right? This is something that this was custom of the Arab, right? They wouldn't leave their house with their head uncovered. It was something that was very normal. And even he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there are rare occasions where he did. Again, but that was part of the Arab culture, right? That was part of the Qurayshi culture. It's not something that he sallallahu alaihi wasallam prescribed or told his companions to follow in or to do. Which brings up an interesting discussion of the beard, but we'll talk about that later. So wiping. Wiping. The first point of discussion, and this is a big point of contention amongst many, if not all the madhahib, is socks. So leather socks. This is by ijma, right? There's no difference of opinion on the leather socks, right? They say that leather socks and shoes by extension, meaning that if I'm wearing shoes, like not slides, right? I can't wipe over slides, but I can wipe over my shoes. If I'm wearing shoes, if I put my socks on, basically, when does this apply? When does wiping apply? I think that's the first thing we need to.
When you have wudu on.
When I have wudu first, right? So I have to make wudu, meaning I have to wash my feet, and then I put socks over it, and then I will wear my shoes on top of those socks. At that point, I can now wipe over my shoes. I can wipe over my shoes. Or if I remove my shoes, I can then wipe over my socks. How do I define socks? This is where it starts. This is where it starts getting interesting. For the gram, all right. Right. So the thick socks. Now, what does thick mean? It means that if you wipe water over them, it's with the K. Huh? So if you wipe water over them, it means that the water will not penetrate, meaning you won't feel the water on your feet. You won't feel the water on your feet. That is how they define thick socks, right? This is what the type of socks that they're talking about. So now the Hanabila, they put conditions on this, right? The Hanbalis, they put conditions on how do I define what a thick sock is. So they say it stays on the feet while walking, meaning it doesn't come off while I'm walking. It doesn't show the complexion of the skin underneath. And water can penetrate if you soak it, meaning if I put my sock in a puddle, I'll feel the water. But if I just wiped over it, it's not necessary that the water actually gets through.
So like standard cotton socks
Just
from Walmart.
exactly.
If you just wipe over it,
Absolutely.
it's
Not just that. I can't see the skin underneath.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
true.
the thing is, in general, like our modern sports socks, those in general are okay. What might be problematic are things like dress socks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. These would be a little bit more problematic. Thin socks. So Abu Hanifa, he saw it to be permissible even if the socks were thin. And this is something that is actually unique to Abu Hanifa, but his two companions did not follow it, and it's not something that's even propagated in the madhab itself. And then the Zahiris, they are the loosest in this. They say anything that is defined as a sock is, for all intents and purposes, a sock, regardless of how thin it is. If somebody looks at it and they say, hey, this is a sock, then you can wipe over it, even if it is an ankle sock. So all of these, they say that the ankle needs to be covered.
Okay.
All right. Versus the Lahiris, they say no, that's not a condition. The ankle doesn't need to be covered, even if it's like an ankle sock, then you can do it. I think even they would have a problem though with like the half socks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think they would have an issue with that. Even the Lahiris would have an issue with that. So again, what are socks, right? How do we define them and what they are? So what's interesting, actually I think I put these slides out of order. We should have been here. I'll fix that. So what about wiping over feet?
I heard
This is
about
interesting,
one.
right? This is actually a really interesting discussion because the Shia, they hold this view, and this is a very common Jafari position where they don't actually wash their feet. Now I'm talking about feet, skin, right? They don't wash the feet; they wipe over it. This is also an opinion that Imam al-Tabari held.
Yeah.
So because of these positions, I think it is very reasonable to take a looser opinion on this. I think this is a very middle of the route type opinion. I think this is a very reasonable way to approach the socks issue without making it too big a deal. Because if you can wipe over your feet, then you should be able, you should be able to wipe over your socks. Now, whether you agree or not, that's a different issue.
Yeah.
I don't agree with wiping over the feet, but there are individuals who do it, and I don't know anybody except the Najdis who say that you can't pray behind the Shia. So how do I deal with wudu? Now, this is where we have a lot of differences of opinion too. So I make wudu normally, right? This is where I wash my feet, and then I put my socks and my shoes on.
Oh, wait. You got that? Okay.
You know what I mean?
That's a classic.
You know what I mean? While I'm wearing my socks and shoes, I break my wudu. So what are my choices? What can I do now? I can wipe over my shoes, right? Or if I take my shoes off, right? So now I've broken my wudu and I take my shoes off. What do I do in this situation?
Wipe over your socks.
I would wipe over my socks. What if I take my socks and my shoes off?
Wash your feet.
Then I have to wash my feet. So what's interesting is what happens in the madhab with this one. But we'll get there, inshallah. So if I over here, I still have my wudu. Okay? I still have my wudu here. And I take my shoes off. What do?
Wipe over your socks.
Okay. I haven't broken my wudu
You
though.
didn't break the wudu.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or I take my socks and my shoes off.
If you haven't broken your wudu. Oh, I guess I would assume it still resets because you took your sock off.
This is where there's a lot of difference of opinion.
Okay.
This is the easiest one that I'm about to share with you guys. You're still good.
Okay. So you can put it back on and be fine.
You're completely fine.
Yeah,
This is a Lahiri opinion, and Ibn Taymiyyah, Bayhaqi, all of them, they hold this opinion that if you had, as long as you made wudu and then you take them off, your wudu is still valid. You don't have to do anything.
So this is a Hanbali opinion?
No,
Okay.
this is a Lahiri in Ibn Taymiyyah.
Okay.
I'll get to the Hanbali opinion right now.
Okay.
But are there any questions on this diagram? You guys want me to go through it again or no? No. So once the socks are removed, according to the Hanabila and the Malikiya, you actually have to wash your feet.
If you broke your wudu.
No.
No.
No,
If you didn't break
taking
your
the socks off.
socks off.
Now this
Reset.
situation, you still have wudu, right? You never broke your wudu. But the only thing you did was you removed your socks. And once you remove your socks, you have to wash your feet. And not just that, according to the Malikiya, if you don't wash your feet immediately after taking your socks off, you actually have to make the entire wudu again.
Oh, wow. This, of course, it says formality.
Yeah. This is the Maliki. So once the socks are removed, the wudu must be repeated. This is the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis. So I'm sorry, the Hanafis and the Malikis.
So I was wondering, what's the significance of the feet here? In that, like, are they just like super dirty parts of the body? Or?
Convenience. Wallahu alam. I'm saying
even the rewashing.
Yeah.
Like,
so even with the wudu itself, the reality is, like, is there an overlap between spiritual and physical cleanliness in the wudu? There is. Like, if I got dirt like right here on my upper arm, right? And I made wudu perfectly. What's going to happen with that dirt or that mud? Nothing. It's going to stay right there. So there is an overlap in terms of cleanliness, but it's not a complete overlap. It's more of a spiritual exercise. You know, I'm washing certain parts of my body, right? I'm only washing certain things. I'm not washing everything. Otherwise, if I had to wash everything, I'd be ordered to make ghusl, right? But I'm not. I'm being ordered to make wudu, even though there can be dirt on certain parts of my body, which does not invalidate my prayer. And it's not necessary that I'm even clean. Like, I can go play basketball, football, dirty, I have grass stains, I have mud on me. And while playing, I never broke my wudu, and I'm sweating and I stink. Can I pray? Yeah, absolutely, right? I can still pray because I haven't broken my wudu. Maybe not the most ideal way to pray, but your prayer would be valid. So once you remove your socks, according to the Hanafis and the Malikis, you have to wash your feet again. And the Malikis even more stringent, saying that it has to be done immediately. If you remove your socks, and this is, again, for our intents and purposes, for the Hanbali madhab, you have to repeat your wudu. You have to repeat your wudu once you remove your socks. And this is talking about socks, right? This is not shoes. Shoes, you're okay. Like, all of them, they think you're okay. So does the removal have no effect? And this is, like I said, this is probably the most lenient opinion. This is the Lahiri and the opinion of Shaykh Islam. Any questions on this? So how long can I wipe for? If you're a resident, you can wipe for 24 hours.
Question.
Yes.
This exception slide is for washing even if your wudu didn't break?
This applies to, you still have wudu. So all of these exceptions, you still have wudu. Right? The wudu did not break. If you're a traveler, 72 hours. And when does it begin? So when do I start my clock?
When you do,
So what?
when you put your socks on.
Or
The shoes have to cover the ankle, or you're referring to the socks?
just the socks? Huh?
Isn't that after you do your wudu and put your socks on?
No,
Like,
it's
doesn't the wiping thing start from
after you first break it.
So from the first time you break your wudu?
Yes, from the first time you break it. So what if I reach the expiration time? So let's say I break my wudu, and at the time I break my wudu, I make wudu again and I wipe. And 24 hours passes. What happens at that time?
It expires.
Right. So your wudu, does it expire? Yes, according to the Hanbali. And you have to you have to take your socks off and you have to make wudu again. And if your wudu is, that's if you break your wudu, and I think that's easy and that's understood. If your wudu is unbroken, after 24 hours, you still have wudu and your wudu didn't break, all you have to do is
Wash your feet.
you take your socks off and you wash your feet. Okay?
Who's doing their wudu for 24 hours?
Yeah.
No, it's not about maintaining your wudu for 24 hours. You've been wiping this entire time.
Okay.
You understand? So I've been making wudu and I've been
got it,
wiping this
got
entire
it,
time.
got it.
The
But
24,
after
the
24
clock
hours.
ends. Now, what do? I have to take my socks off and wash my feet.
But how about when you go to sleep?
Huh?
How about when you
Yeah.
go to sleep?
Maybe you didn't go.
Timer. You still have to worry about the timer. That's all it is.
So,
So
within
you can
24 hours,
Yeah.
so I can keep my socks on pretty much all day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right before I go to bed,
Uh-huh.
take my socks off, wipe my feet. By the time I wake up, I'm still technically
You're still okay.
good. Like, I can put my socks back on and keep going.
No, you can't put. You took them off.
I took them off. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But if I go to bed with my socks on, I'm good.
You're still okay.
Really?
You wake up and you make wudu and you wipe over your socks.
Wow.
If you already had wudu.
I don't know.
Yeah, if you had, yes, you had to have made wudu, put your socks on, went to sleep.
Yeah. Okay.
When you wake up, all you have to do is
Watch your
wipe your feet.
But you need to make sure that you're wearing your socks.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh.
And if you wake up with like one sock,
Yeah.
then you have to wash both your feet. So what if you change status? Like in the middle, like, you wipe, then you travel, and then you come back. What takes precedence in this situation? What do I take, the 24 or the 72 hours?
74.
No, I take the 24, right? Residence always takes precedence. It's always going to take precedence whenever you enter the residence again.
So you stop being a traveler once you enter the vicinity.
So how do you determine what a traveler is? There's a difference of opinion amongst the madhahib, but the Hanbalis, they say it's like 70 kilometers. So a 70 kilometer radius from wherever your home is. And not just that, you can have multiple residences.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're within 70 kilometers, you are no longer a traveler. You're now a resident. So all the rulings of the resident will apply at that point.
Okay.
So turban and other items, I think we'll do this. We can do this really quickly. So there are two types of turbans that the Hanabila talk about. Both of these have some type of tail. So you have the piece that hangs below the neck here. I think it's called mukannaha. I don't remember the word. I think it's mukannaha or munakkaha. I'm sorry, munakkaha. And then this one in mudayyida. This is the one, it comes around your neck, right? This is the one, and then the second one mudayyida. You see the tail here? That's why it's called mudayyida.
I know.
So there are other types that don't have a tail, like the sikhware, but the Hanabila, they dislike them. They say that these other types are disliked because they're foreign to they're basically foreign to the Arab understanding of the turban, but it's still permissible to wipe. It's still permissible to wipe over the turban. What is unique about the turban versus the qulunsawa or versus the tagiya is that it's difficult to remove. It's difficult to remove. By extension, this also applies to the khimar or hijab.
You can wipe over
You can wipe over your hijab?
Yes, you can.
when traveling, or
Doesn't matter.
in general?
Is
it part of
Huh?
I never knew that.
Oh, okay.
No, everyone takes it out to make their living.
I mean,
Wipe on the hijab.
yes.
Allah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that only according to Hanabilas?
Or
No, I believe that's within all of them. So the cast.
That's yours.
Okay, so the cast is permissible to wipe over even if you didn't have wudu before the cast got put on. Okay, so it's not a condition. It's not a condition to have wudu, and sometimes that's very difficult. So because sometimes it's after you've been operated on, so there's no way for you to have made wudu before that. It is not a condition for that. And there's the time limit is for whenever the cast has to stay on. So as long as it stays on, you can continue wiping over it. What's interesting is that Lahiri say that there's no wiping over casts. You just leave it because there's nothing you can do about it. And the khimar, like we said, is permissible. Any questions?
If you try to wipe over your scarf, do you have to have done wudu before?
Yeah, of course.
And do
Yeah.
that proper muscle?
All of these wipings, it's after wudu.
Okay.
All of these wipings is after wudu.
And is the time period the same for the?
Yeah.
Yes. It's 24 hours. Yes.
One of the questions. Is it cool to wipe over bandages? Like say you slice your hand open at home.
It depends on the type of cut. So if the water will harm or it'll cause infection or make it worse, then you don't have to wash that area. But if the water is not going to affect the cut, then you have to wash it. So for those who didn't hear the question, it's basically, can I wipe over a bandage? And that depends on whether the water will affect the scar or not. That's it.
We had a clarification on Facebook, which I was on, but about wiping over the hijab.
Okay.
That yes, you can't wipe over it.
Yes, absolutely. No, again, the only condition with all of these wipings, it has to be after the person made wudu first, right? That's it. And the time frames similar to the time frames of the socks. Class, we don't have any other questions. For those of you who are in the tazkiyah class, I will see you then. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik, wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, wa jazakumullah khair.
The 8, yeah.
Yes.